and yet he thinks that the idea of the song Happy Birthday is a meme is a good example rather than Catholicism, for example.
Yeah, pesky Catholicism. Yes. Well, all right. Well, that was fun. I think maybe what we'll do on the Daily Wire side, I told you I had an insane idea that I wanted to talk to you about. I think maybe we'll do that there. We're going to do it as a game because it's a joke, this idea. But that doesn't mean that I know what the idea is, in its essence. And I don't know, that doesn't mean I know what its significance is for one way or another. So, well, with that teaser for everybody who's watching and listening to join us on the Daily Wire Plus side, I think we'll bring this to a close. Do you want to just tell everybody to close off the website and the X handle for this rally in this event? What are we going to call it? What's the term? Event? Rally?
Rally, I think.
Yeah, there's got to be a better word. This mind-blowing moment in history.
Celebration.
Celebration is a good one. It's called.
Yeah, celebration is a good one.
It's called Rescue the Republic. The website is jointheresistance.org. The Twitter handle is Rescue Republic. And can I make one final pitch?
Hey, fire away.
Okay. The reason that it is so important to show up is because we actually, in this upcoming American election, are faced with something that has effectively declared war on our Constitution and a brand new coalition that does not look like anything that has existed politically in our lifetime, certainly, or probably ever. And that thing has to win decisively to overcome any capacity to cheat, and in order to become a durable movement. And so the point is, this is the place to become visible physically. It's undeniable. Either the news will fail to report it, in which case we will know something about what side they are on, or they will report it in some way, hopefully honestly, but if they don't, we'll be able to see their distortion, and that will tell us what has taken place. This is not MAGA. It contains MAGA, but it contains many other factions, and it is truly powerful. All signals suggest people are putting aside every important ideological difference and standing shoulder to shoulder to defend effectively our lineage and its ability to continue into the future.
All right. Well, that's a very good place to end. Thanks to both of you and to everybody who's watching for their time and attention, to the film crew here in Scottsdale. We'll move over to the Daily Wire side, and I can tell you my crazy idea because it's very comical as far as I'm concerned. It's ridiculously comical. All right, good. So thank you everybody for watching and listening, and thanks again. Heather, Brett, it's very good to see you guys.
Great seeing you.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our FlexPath learning format lets you learn on your own schedule. A different future. Hear that? Pumpkin. That's fall calling. And the pumpkin spice latte is back at Starbucks. From that first sweater to late autumn weather. It's all of fall in just one sip. Order ahead on the Starbucks app.
Hello, everybody. I have the privilege today to speak yet again to Professor John Vervaeke. He's a repeat guest on my show, maybe more than anyone else. That's possible. John and I have been involved in a conversation now that spans more than a decade. We've been both working assiduously in different ways on defining the meaning crisis and also exploring potential solutions to that crisis, and with some success, I would say. And one of the things that we do in today's conversation is to continue that dialogue and to delve more deeply into what the meaning crisis signifies, and also what it means, say in John's terms, that there's a new advent of the sacred, and what that means, what the sacred means, what a new advent might look like, what that means philosophically, what it means scientifically and theologically for that matter. We spend a fair bit of time as well discussing Peterson Academy. John's one of the lecturers there. He's done 3 courses for us, which have been the first one is released already. It's been very well received. And along with Pajot and my work on the Peterson Academy, that's another place where this meaning crisis, at least in principle, is in the process of being resolved. And that, God only knows what that means, but it seems to be a genuine phenomenon. And phenomenon, that means to shine forth, by the way, and that does look genuine. And so, well, John and I had the opportunity to delve more deeply into all of those issues, and that's great fun. That's an enthusiastic fun, and when that makes itself manifest in a conversation, you see that in itself is something like the advent of the sacred, because a conversation that takes you outside yourself and beyond yourself and into the future and up into the realm of higher possibility is a manifestation of the sacred that's been characterized for centuries as part of the process of the Logos. And it's so useful and interesting to understand that you can experience that, and that you do experience that when you get caught up in let's say, an exploratory conversation. We talked about other ways you can get caught up in love and enraptured by beauty, but the thrill, the enthusiastic thrill of a conversation that's transformative is a marker for the emergence of something that the world depends upon, right? And that's something sacred. And there it is, tangible as hell. So that's a very useful thing to know. So join us. So, good to see you again.
Good to see you too, my friend.
We spent a lot of time together this year on the tour in particular, eh?
Yeah, on the tour.
So you got any thoughts about the tour?
Well, I mean, and the gospel seminar too.
Right.
The gospel seminars was a very profound experience for me. As you know, I was a little bit hesitant because I don't consider myself a Christian, but you were extremely welcoming. You were good to your word, as you always have been with me. And of course, there was a lot of people there that I'm very fond of: Douglas Headley, Jonathan Pajot, Stephen Blackwood, and I became fond of some people like Greg Horowitz, and so it was. I had a really amazing time. But
well, I'll give people the background on that. So, John came down we tempted Nashville. Eh?
It was Nashville, yeah.
Yeah. So we did, as many of you watching and listening know, I did a seminar with a group of people on Exodus that we released a year ago on the Daily Wire, and it's become the most popular thing they've done, apart from What is a Woman by Matt Walsh. And it was quite a trip to go through the Exodus story with a group of 8 scholars. I learned a ridiculous amount, and so we decided to duplicate that procedurally with the Gospels. And so we had many of the same crew, but John came along for the gospel seminar, and that worked out very well. That's going to be released between now and December, by the way, on the Daily Wire platform. And so they're very happy with the way it's turned out, and there'll be more images in it, more interviews. And so it'll be a little pepped up on the editing side from the Exodus seminar. So why did you like the gospel seminar?
I'm not making a comparison to the Exodus because I wasn't there, but as you know, I was brought up in a very sort of fundamentalist Christianity, and so I've had a very slow, at times therapeutic, rapprochement. I hope that came through in my how I showed up at the gospel seminar.
Oh, definitely.
And I came to like sort of a profound. This sounds like a Hallmark card, so I know you won't take it up. But I came to a sort of profound sort of reorientation, reappreciation, reapprehension of Jesus of Nazareth. And this may sound. I'm asking for some charity in the next thing I'm going to say.
Sure.
I'd always missed being a Christian in some sense. I missed going to church. I missed the community. I missed that sense of having a mythos that you belong to.
And a community.
Any community, yeah. And so, but I'm trying to make this positive. I lost that longing at the gospel seminar, not because I became a Christian, but because I felt I came close. Well, there was a moment, if you remember the gospel seminar, where I said, like, I consider myself a deep follower of the Logos.
Yeah, right.
And that became, and that wasn't just a statement for me. And because of the people that were there and the way they received it, I felt, I don't want to get too overly egocentric, but that was a very healing moment for me.
Well, it's a remarkable thing to realize. You know, I had a discussion with Elon Musk recently, you know, and he had a very cataclysmic existential crisis around 13 or 14. And, you know, Musk has a world-class intellect, so it's not surprising that it happened to him early. And it had something to do with the conflict between the scientific view of the world, the hypothetical conflict between the scientific view of the world and the religious view. And it took him a number of years to resolve that. And I think essentially the way he resolved that was by realizing his identity with the Logos. Now, that's not exactly how he put it, but then he didn't have the benefit of the gospel seminar, for example. But what he discovered was that he could find intrinsic meaning in life by pursuing the path of the exploration of truth, right? And I don't think there is any real difference between the Logos and the pursuit of truth. Now, what that means theologically, well, you could unpack that for millennia, because human beings have been unpacking it for millennia. But it is perfectly reasonable, and I think in keeping with your work, to point out that investigation into truth itself, is a form of truth. Jean Piaget said that is that if we're going to understand knowledge, what we really want to understand is not the structure of knowledge, but the process by which knowledge builds and is regenerated, yes. Right? And so Piaget figured that out. And to follow that deep commitment to the truth and that continual exploration is identification with the Logos. And that certainly characterizes your work. And it's good to put that back into context. I mean, I've been struck too by the fact that, you know, the Greeks, I released a series of documentaries on the Daily Wire as well. The last one of 4 is coming out this week, I believe. Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome, 2 in Jerusalem. And one of the things that's remarkable about the conjunction of Greece and Jerusalem is the Greeks posited the existence of a Logos that was embedded essentially in the material and corporeal world, that there was an intrinsic logic to things, that the world itself was comprehensible and that comprehending the world was good. And the Jews, essentially, and the Christians had an embodied Logos idea that the human being was a rational creature and an exploratory creature, and that there was a match between that and the world. And that combination of Greece and Jerusalem is one of the sources of Western civilization. But it's very good to be able to conceptualize the gospel account in that manner, because it starts to put rationality and the mythos that you described back together, which is, I think, you know, something of cardinal importance and I think it's what's occurring in our current time.
Thank you for saying that. I think that was very well articulated. For me, it afforded, because the kind of truth we're talking about is existential truth. We're not talking about just propositional truth.
Right.
We're talking about the truth that's only, and Piaget would agree with this, the kind of truth that only is realized through personal transformation.
And embodiment.
Yes, of course. And it was, so Jesus of Nazareth and Socrates could probably dwell together within me.
Right. And that's kind of a classic Western view as well. I mean, even Dante put the Greek philosophers in the uppermost echelons of hell, right? I mean, which was a compliment in a fundamental way.
Justin Martyr said that Socrates was a Christian before Christ.
Right. And that was part of that juxtaposition of Greece and Jerusalem, right?
Yeah.
Because it was evident that the same spirit was trying to make itself manifest in two different ways.
You have two different notions of the logos that are complementary, right? The Greek notion is this notion of gathering things together so they belong together, so they're intelligible.
Yeah.
And then you have the Hebrew notion of the logos as the way in which, like the way in which language and thought create and make and speak into existence. Of course, we do it in a very limited fashion, and then the idea is there's some sort of ultimate aspect of it, and then they're brought together.
Well, one of the things that I wrote about, I have a new book coming out in November, and I actually drew somewhat heavily on Richard Dawkins for parts of the book.
We Who Wrestle with God.
We Who Wrestle with God.
I've read it, of course.
Right, of course, and we're on the tour with me.
Yeah.
And so Dawkins makes a strong case and repeats it again in his newest book, which is just out, that an organism, any biological organism, has to be a microcosm of its environment, has to be a model. So it has to reflect the environment at every level, right? From the molecular all the way up.
Princeton says the same thing.
Right.
Princeton says you don't have a model, you are a model.
Right. And well, that's exactly what I guess Dawkins would say, both. You have a model, or you are a model and you have a model, and that would be particularly true for people. And well, the fact that you're a model and that you have a model, so that's the interior logos that might be more associated with, say, Judeo-Christian thought, but it has to match the external logos of the world, because otherwise it has no connection point. But that also begs a question, which is one of the questions I raise in this book, is that if Dawkins is correct in that supposition, that an organism has to be a microcosm of its environment, and human beings are embodied personalities at the highest level of their organization, then how can it be otherwise than that the human being as a personality is a reflection of the essence of the cosmos, let's say? Or pretentious, but
well, not pretentious. I mean, it could be taken as pretentious, or you could reframe it as there are potentialities in reality that are only actualized in our personhood,
right?
And they reflect. And without us, access to those principles in reality would not be available.
Well, that seems to be akin to something like emergence.
Well, right? I mean, yeah, very much.
You can think about us as random, like as the consequence of random processes, which I think is a fairly absurd way of looking at the evolutionary process. But you can also look at us as manifestations of the potential that was inherent in the material substrate right from the beginning of time, right? And we know that these potentials exist because, well, hydrogen and oxygen join to make water, and so on up the chain of complexity. And what that seems to indicate to me is that there's an unrealized potential, even in the simplest of material forms, that contains within it, well, whatever possibility is. It's very difficult to define, but that it isn't that possibility makes itself manifest in an entirely random manner. It reflects something like an implicate order in those lower order material properties or properties.
So you're turning in, and this is a great joy for me, you're turning into a Neoplatonist, because I mean, you have emergence up, right? But emergence up has to be constrained. There has to be an ordering to those possibilities because of the possibility. This is a point even made by Whitehead much later.
Yeah, it'd be just chaotic otherwise.
Right. So you have emergence up, and if you had emergence up without constraint down, the top level would just be an epiphenomena. But the top level, as a level, has to constrain what's going. And this is this is in the book I'm working on with Greg Enriquez on consciousness. That you not only have bottom-up emergence, you have top-down emanation. And that's the Neoplatonic view. That's the view that went into the heart.
That seems to be the same view that Pajot holds, I would say.
Well, of course he does, because he's an Eastern Orthodox Christian, as we're going to say. Christian Neoplatonism is at the core of people like Jonathan Pajot and Bishop Maximus. Eastern Orthodoxy, all of Christian mysticism is profoundly influenced by Greek Neoplatonism, but especially Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Yes, very much.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the gospel seminar. I learned a lot. It was quite a cognitive effort to get through that in a week.
You did a good job.
All that on track. Well, thank God for that. I was pretty much out of it for the next 3 weeks in consequence, but it was well worth it. So, and I have a follow-up volume to the book I'm going to publish in November, which is specifically on the book of Job and on the Gospels. And this seminar certainly helped me flesh that out to a tremendous degree as well. I'm just in the writing now. I'm just getting to the story of the crucifixion and resurrection, which is, of course, the most complex.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about something that matters, your well-being. In a world where traditional values are under siege, it's crucial to stay strong mentally and physically. Enter Responsible Man, a Daily Wire Ventures company that understands what it means to be a pillar of strength in these challenging times. They've created the Emerson Multivitamin not for the faint of heart, but for men who shoulder their responsibilities with pride. The Emerson Multivitamin contains 33 key ingredients that work in harmony to fortify your immune system, sharpen your mental acuity, and maintain the strength of your heart and muscles. It's not just a vitamin, it's fuel for the culture battles that we face every single day. And here's something to make you stand just a little taller. Every Emerson Multivitamin is proudly made in the US of A. No compromises, no shortcuts, just pure American craftsmanship. And now listeners of this show have an exclusive opportunity to invest in their health and values simultaneously. Take advantage of Responsible Man's fall sale. Visit responsibleman.com and use code Jordan to get 30% off your order, plus an additional $9 off your first order. But hurry, because this deal won't last long. Remember, a resilient society needs resilient men. Start your journey to better health and a stronger America with Responsible Man vitamins. That's responsibleman.com, code Jordan for 30% off, plus an additional $9 off your first order. Responsible Man, because true strength comes from within.
And challenging part of that entire narrative, and so
I remember when we read the Gospel. Everybody was worried about that.
Oh yeah, well we were worried about the seminar period about but I thought it went extremely well, and we were very happy to have you there. And I mean everybody. One of the wonderful things about the Exodus seminar and the Gospel seminar is that Logos spirit, everybody abided by that Logos spirit 100% of the time, because everybody was trying to extend their knowledge instead of trying to prove that they were right.
Exactly.
Right. And that's something like the opposite of that Pharisaic religious pride that's often conceptualized as the ultimate sin, right? Is that, when you're trying to hammer home your status because you're right about something, that's a completely different game than trying to build something together that expands you both in the course of the conversation. I think the seminars were flawless examples of that. Everybody played extremely well together, despite very
play music, like the way you play music.
Yeah, right.
Socrates made a distinction between philosophia, the love of wisdom, and philonokia, the love of victory. And he said the greatest thing that thwarts the love of wisdom is the love of victory.
Right. I wonder if there's any difference between the love of victory and the worship of power.
I mean, most of the opponents that Socrates is wrestling with are the sophists, and they are definitely advocates for that reality is power, and that having power is what you're after. They were deeply political animals in that fashion. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, so one of the things I've wondered about too in recent years is, so imagine that there are different forms of conceptualization and action that can lead to something approximating a higher order unity. And power would be one, because you can unify to some degree with power. I mean, it produces a counterposition, because if you use power on people, they tend to rebel. But at least for some periods of time, you can use command and force to bring together. But I have a sneaking suspicion that it's much better to bring people together in a unity under the aegis of something like the Logos, which is that game of genuine exploration and self-transcendence. But maybe there could be a corollary to that, which would be that if God dies, if the God is Logos and it dies, the deity that rises to replace it is power.
Wow, you do what you frequently do. That's very pregnant with a lot of possibilities. I mean, first of all, that notion of dialogos by means of a logos, and then I think that's something we practice, we should practice and do a lot of work about trying to help afford people being able to practice that as an explicit practice. So I think that's a very valuable thing to say. I think power. I think power is one of our senses of realness. I think, and we need it. You talk about this. you talk about the fact that we don't want to be overwhelmed by anomaly. We need to have some power. We need to be able to, our skills have to get a purchase on the world, right? So
yeah, I'm thinking not so much power. That's more of a Nietzschean notion of power, I would say, a functional. I'm thinking more of compulsion, right? Like that I can force you to abide by the dictates of my
this is better than
power, with power as force, not power so much as
that
ability.
mark of reality. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so let's move to there, because what's really interesting is this, and talked about this in the course on the Peterson Academy, the primacy of beauty. You got this really interesting thing, because, right, you want reason to be compelling, but voluntarily.
Yeah, right.
Right.
The voluntarism is a crucial element.
Right. But you don't want it to just be arbitrary. You're like, no. Reason compels me. We say things like that, and we don't think the person's insane. We go, oh, I get what you mean. That's a really good argument. And then this goes towards Frankfurt's notion of, well, reason is voluntary necessity. But then there's another thing that seems to be voluntary necessity, which is what his book is about, Reasons for Love. Love is a voluntary necessity. It seems like you're compelled, but yet it seems to be totally what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
And then if you think about what love picks up on.
That might be something like the concordance between calling and psyche.
Well, let me pick up on that, because think about what love is often. This is a Platonic argument. Love is often a response to beauty, and beauty has that same thing. It's kind of like it calls you. It's this voluntary necessity. You're struck by beauty. You're compelled, but you don't feel forced. It's like right. And so you've got this interlocking between reason and love and beauty.
Yeah.
Which
So
I think.
I wonder if that's something like. See, you object to someone's arbitrary imposition of compulsion over you because this is one way of looking at it, is they're forcing you to perceive and communicate and to act in a manner that isn't in keeping with the structure of your values, right? So it strikes you as counterproductive with regards to your own aims, let's say, and that produces a sense of disharmony and rebellion. It could be that the reason that beauty and love can be compelling without being powerful in that compulsion way is that they speak to something like an emergent harmony of value that's part and parcel, you might say, of the soul. So beauty could compel you forward in part because it might be that if you integrated your values properly, you would be naturally oriented in consequence of the makeup of your soul towards those things that beauty and love are pointing to.
Right. And let's not remember, beauty and love are also overlapping with reason. And you need reason because you have to care about the right things to reason well. And
yes, you have to care about the right things, which implies that there are right things to care about.
And so notice what you're doing. And that goes back to the microcosm, macrocosm,
Yeah, right.
Is that moment where the principle, the grammar of my cognition and the grammar of reality are calling to each other. They could
interpenetrate.
That's right. And I can't give you an argument to prove that that's the case, because every argument presupposes that in some sense the grammar of reason and the grammar of reality must have some deep harmony. And the same thing with love and the same thing with beauty. Right? And these are profound ways in which...
Well, I think faith is actually the willingness to posit the reality of that truth in the absence of final proof.
Okay, let's talk about that, because I think that's really important, because there's different notions of faith. And what I hear you saying, I might be wrong.
Yeah.
What I hear you saying is faith is a recognition of the power in the good sense that we're talking about here. The power of these primordial presuppositions that are central for participating in the logos, participating in the true, the good, and the beautiful. And that's a different notion of faith than the assertion of belief without evidence.
Yes, very, very much so. Well, this is something that we concentrated quite a bit on in the gospel seminar because, this is actually a problem that I have with the classic, what would you say? The standard Christian community. Well, now, because the Christians are all annoyed at me because I haven't proclaimed my faith in the propositional manner that many people who've adopted a creed would require. And so they're upset about that and on my case. And I find it's quite distasteful in some ways. There's an invitational element, but there's a compulsion element, and the compulsion element is, first of all, the insistence that the faith that's necessary to define something like Christianity is actually propositional. Now, it should be the case that your propositional content is in alignment with your existential commitments. But for me, the fundamental move of faith is an existential move. And the danger in the propositional, this is the Pharisaic danger, as far as I'm concerned, is that you substitute the propositional for the existential.
Totally. Well, and this goes, I talk about the four kinds of knowing: the propositional, the procedural, right, the perspectival, and the participatory. Think about the two levels you've gone from being a model to perhaps having a representation of it, and then trying to capture that model in a set of propositions. You're now two steps removed from the actual knowing that is you being the microcosmic model of the macrocosm. That's participatory knowing. That's the knowing that makes all the other knowings possible. And
would that be understanding?
No, I think all the kinds of knowing have their own. I think understanding is a way of grasping the significance of what you know, and this isn't my idea. This is sort of pretty much almost consensus view in the philosophy of science, because you're trying to distinguish between when science is generating knowledge versus when science is generating understanding. Because science will often say things that are false in order to generate understanding. Here's the atom. It looks like a solar system. Well, no, it doesn't. Right. Not at all. Right. Here's how gas works. Here's the ideal gas law. Well, there's no such ideal situations in reality. Right. Catherine Elgin writes about this in True Enough. So True Enough. Yeah. Right. Why do you do this? It's not that you don't care about the truth. It's that she calls them felicitous fictions, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to properly orient on the significance of what is known, as opposed to give you evidence for coming to new beliefs and getting new knowledge. There's a difference there. And so I think understanding, and I get the illusion, faith-seeking understanding. I understand, but I think that they're a little bit different. I think you have these primordial propositions that are your primordial participation that make your cognitive agency possible, right? And then you I don't know you properly orient and identify with them. And when you understand that, it's to step back and let them see how those primordial propositions are playing out. What's the significance landscape they're creating for you? That's what I think it means when
that seems to me to be associated too with this idea of higher order ethical virtue. So let me walk through this with you for a second. Tell me what you think. Well, I've been thinking more and more about general psychopathology as a failure of maturation, right? So
you mean like being a psychopath? Is that what you mean? Well,
being a psychopath is a good example of that, because 2-year-olds, for example, are radically egocentric, right? They can't play with others. They can't occupy a shared mental space. They can't take turns. There's some proto-sharing that emerges, but they're not sophisticated, for example, at sharing toys. So the typical 2-year-old, and some of them are much more like this than others, they're oriented to the moment, and they're oriented to gratify the emotional or motivational state or whim that possesses them in the moment.
Sure.
Now, what happens as they mature, say from 2 to 4 in particular, is they learn how to bring another party into their goal-directed space and to unify their desires, their whims, their motivational states with that of another. That's how they make a friend.
Is that what you mean by going up this hierarchy?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now you can imagine these primordial motivational states and emotions, and we kind of know what the basic ones are. They're all pointers, fractionated pointers in an upward direction, but the upward direction actually emerges as a consequence of their interactions across time, but not only across time in a social space. And they weave themselves together, and this would be something like Jacob's Ladder from the bottom up. They weave themselves together, so more and more things are taken into account simultaneously. And I think that parallels cortical maturation in a society, let's say, that properly socializes children. I don't think there's anything arbitrary about it. I mean, you and I have been able to have a relationship because of the pattern of interaction that we fall into when we converse. You make an offering, and then I assess it and incorporate it, and then I make an offering and you assess it and incorporate it. And we're able to do that in a way that jointly gratifies our desire to explore and integrate, right? And that is a cognitive act and a embodied act, but it's also something that indicates our fundamental concordance with each other at a level that's more than merely personal, right? You're doing something, this is the dialogos that you referred to, right? You're making an offering that I'm accepting and vice versa, but we can do that in a manner that makes both of us want to continue the process. And
that's definitional.
That's not an arbitrary definition of a moral interaction, right? It's very practical. It's like, well, and it's an optimistic viewpoint too, because then you could say that the patterns of action that most optimally facilitate the desire to continue the patterns of action are in principle, are pointers towards the most moral way of behaving, right? And I think that's manifest in something like play. We know there's a mammalian play circuit, so we're actually adapted to having these happen, and it's a fragile motivational state because it can be disrupted by any other motivation or emotion. But play seems to be an indicator that harmony of emotion and motivation oriented towards the future and towards the maintenance of social interaction is in play at the moment. And I don't think that this seems to me to be a very powerful argument against something like moral relativism. It's like, no, there are a very finite number of ways that you can pattern your dialogos, let's say, so that both parties involved want to stay involved in it over radically long spaces of time, and not just time, let's say, also different domains of inquiry, and that's there's nothing about that isn't highly constrained and orderly.
Yeah, this is very, first of all, I think very highly of what you're saying. It's convergent with a lot of things that I also think highly of. This is Habermas's proposal of universal pragmatics, that there is in the very act of communication, and he doesn't mean simply information exchange. He means in the very act of dialogos, which I agree with him, is necessary for a properly functioning society, let alone a properly functioning democracy. That there are pragmatic, in the linguistic sense of pragmatic, there are pragmatic constraints that are there, that are constitutively necessary in order for the dialogos that is person-making and culture-making and society-making to be present, and there are universal principles. Now, the products, like a conversation, there are universal principles. That doesn't mean the products are universal.
Right. No, the process.
The process is like...
Well, and you added another layer to that, which is relevant with regards to emergence, because, you could say, well, we have to conduct ourselves in a certain manner, like all the participants did, let's say, at the gospel seminar, in order for everyone to want to continue the process in the highest possible manner. But then you could also say that works for you psychologically because it's compelling and interesting, and it works for both of us practically because we learn. But then as you expand the size of the group that process is operating in, you start to see a concordance between the operation of that dialogos and the possibility of sophisticated, complex societies emerging that aren't predicated on power. And I think that's why we have, for example, in the United States, we have the First Amendment. It's because it's a recognition that something like you have the right to engagement in the dialogos, not merely because it's a right, let's say, because you're made in the image of God, or it's a right because the state grants it. It's actually a right because it's a necessary precondition for the maintenance of the society as such. And that's not arbitrary. It's like it works for you. It works for the people you're immediately communicating with, but it also works to stabilize society across long spans of time and to make it grow. And so you can't dispense with that without bringing the whole hierarchy.
I want to add to it.
Yeah.
So, and this goes to work I've done with Dan Shappy and a whole bunch of other people. When you get dialogical systems, you get the possibility of Right. You get the possibility of distributed cognition. The way the internet is distributed computation and releases powers that know where is the internet. Notice the problems we can solve with the internet that we couldn't solve with individual computers. When you get
Going online without ExpressVPN is like not paying attention to the safety demonstration on a flight. Most of the time, you'll probably be fine, but what if one day that weird yellow mask drops down from overhead and you have no idea what to do? In our hyper-connected world, your digital privacy isn't just a luxury, it's a fundamental right. Every time you connect to an unsecured network in a cafe, hotel, or airport, you're essentially broadcasting your personal information to anyone with the technical know-how to intercept it. And let's be clear, it doesn't take a genius hacker to do this. With some off-the-shelf hardware, even a tech-savvy teenager could potentially access your passwords, bank logins, and credit card details. Now, you might think, what's the big deal? Who want my data anyway? Well, on the dark web, your personal information could fetch up to $1,000. That's right, there's a whole underground economy built on stolen identities. Enter ExpressVPN. It's like a digital fortress, creating an encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. Their encryption is so robust that it would take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to crack it. But don't let its power fool you. ExpressVPN is incredibly user-friendly. With just one click, you're protected across all your devices. Phones, laptops, tablets, you name it. That's why I use ExpressVPN whenever I'm traveling or working from a coffee shop. It gives me peace of mind knowing that my research, communications, and personal data are shielded from prying eyes. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Jordan. That's expressvpn.com/Jordan, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/Jordan.
The right dialogical machinery going, you also afford distributed cognition, and distributed cognition gains access to reality,
right,
and can
that's
solve
basically
problems.
the argument of the Austrian School of Economics, right, with regards
I've had
to distributed systems. Right?
I've had some very good discussions with Robert Breedlove around that, about exactly that. And Dan Giappier, and we did a thing about how the NASA scientists do this. They create these dialogical narrative practices in order to coordinate distributed cognition to move the rovers around on Mars.
Right. I remember you saying that. So you taught a course for Peterson Academy. Let's talk a little bit about your experience, first of all. So, as you remember, and you graciously said recently in the Toronto Star interview, I offered you the possibility of coming to teach for us about absolutely anything you wanted to teach about. So walk us through the experience and the course, and then I'll update you a little bit about the state of the art with regard to this endeavor.
First of all, I want to thank the reporter. The reporter reached out to me at the last moment and said, I'm going to do this. And do you want to talk? And I said, I bet. I really do want to talk, because I wanted to be clear. And I'm not attributing anything to this person, but get this, I've been misquoted before.
Yeah, right.
Right. And so, and there's a couple things I was very insistent on. So I'm happy that it came out the way it came out. I just want to express as far as I can tell, the reporter was true to their word. And I think that's honorable.
Yeah.
And when reporters are honorable, we should honor.
Absolutely.
So, that being said, first of all, let's talk about the first course that's out right now. But I've done 3 for you.
Right.
So the first one is intelligence, rationality, wisdom, and spirituality.
Right, and it's already up on the site.
Yep, and I've got feedback from some of your people that it's getting very well received, which I'm very happy.
That's for sure.
I'm very happy to hear that. So first of all, let's going through the experience. Pleased throughout all 3 times. I don't know if I should mention any names, but like Vincent, the person, excellent, just fantastic. Your crews are fantastic, super professional, gracious, careful, competent, inviting,
good,
welcoming, constantly checking with me about my needs. How can we improve this? How can we do this? Right? And just.
Good. Glad to hear that.
That's what I said. I've said consistently to everybody who asked me about it. It's very, very professional. I want to make clear what I made clear in the interview. You when you reached out to me and I wrote you an email and I said, I don't consider myself a conservative or a Christian. Do you want me to on this? And you said, of course I do. I want you to, and you were true to your word. You gave me absolute intellectual autonomy. I have had a course. You said, and I've said this on video, so I'm happy to say it again. I want you to teach the course you've always wanted to teach.
Yep.
And true to your word, all the way through, for all of these courses so far. I'm proud, genuinely proud of all of the courses I've done.
Great. Well, we're dead serious about that. I mean, my intention in identifying people is that I am bringing people to the platform whose views I want to hear. And I actually want to hear them. And so that means that the constraints have to be lifted. It's like, no, I want to hear what you have to say. And it's such a wonderful thing to be able to afford people this possibility because, when you're teaching in a university, you have an approximation of that, but you're subject to a whole set of constraints, some of which are necessary and some of which just are entirely arbitrary. And it's not helpful because you can't wander where the spirit takes you.
Can't follow the logos.
Exactly. And you need to be able to do that. And I think I've taught 3 courses for Peterson Academy too, and I certainly felt the freedom that this new format allows. And so I should bring you up to date a little bit too. So,
please.
Well, so we launched our pre-enrollment, and it was really a way of testing the system and to see, first of all, if we could handle the user load, to test to see how people are responding, and to also assess whether we got the price right, and to assess the reaction of the market, all of that. And so we onboarded 30,000 people.
Oh,
no kidding. So that exceeded our expectations quite nicely. And the price point seems good. And I could delve into that a little bit because, the odd person says, well, why isn't it free? And I mean, there's a bunch of answers to that. Is one, if it's free, you're the product and don't forget it. Second, on the social media side, because it has a sophisticated social media system, there's an open question about social media platforms now. If they're free, they're instantly invaded by bad actors, right? Because your attention isn't free. And so it's very valuable. And so you get hordes of trolls, you get hordes of bots, you get bad corporate actors. The whole thing can deteriorate. And what we are seeing and what we hoped for was that a relatively stringent price point, so it's about $40 a month, and a relatively stringent price point eradicates 95% of the bad actors.
That, yeah.
Right, so that's cool. That's worth something, because you have to ask yourself, if you're going to use a social media network, how much is it worth on an ongoing daily basis? Like, is it worth $1 a day? Because that's approximately, or $1.25, that's what we're talking about. Is it worth that not to be chronically annoyed by the pathology of the system? And I would say it's worth something for that to be the case. So, and people are pleased with the price. The indications we've had so far is that people would have paid more and still been happy. So I think we probably undershot the market limit, but I'm fine with that. That's perfectly fine. And now we've raised enough capital because we have enough students to start doing the AI language translations. And so we should be able to translate all of the courses into God only knows how many languages eventually. And that technology is really coming along quite nicely. And we're going to branch out so that we'll have representatives in, well, to begin with, all the major countries in the world. And hopefully we can bring the advantages of elite higher education to anyone who wants it. And I think we actually have a crack at doing that. So it's quite, and our system worked. It didn't, there were some bugs and people were quite patient while we worked through them, and the team worked very hard to rectify them as soon as possible. But
yeah, I was your first course recorded, so yeah.
Right. Well, congratulations on that too. So that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm very excited about it, and we're working. We have jurisdictions that are interested in working with us towards accreditation, so we're happy about that. But we've also found that probably 75% of the people on the platform aren't interested in credit per se. They're not even necessarily interested in taking the quizzes that are available. Fundamentally, they're there because they want to learn. Lots of them, for example, are older people. I wouldn't say that's the majority, but lots of people wanted to go to university and couldn't. And so we can provide them with an extremely high quality university experience. And
I suspected that would be the case.
So that's gratifying as well.
Yeah.
So the full launch is September 9th.
Right.
And that's when you'll get your access and when you'll be able to start interacting with students on the social media platform and on your course site as well. So that should be, hopefully, I've spent a fair bit of time on the social media platform so far, and it's a very positive place, so that's very good. And it has all the features of standard social media system. So I'm also kind of hoping that, for academically oriented people, maybe it'll be a replacement for the other social media networks.
That'd be nice.
Who knows, eh?
Because a lot of those are quite toxic.
Very, very. I use Twitter a lot, and I learn a lot from Twitter, but my God, it's a snake pit. It's a terrible snake pit.
I use it as minimally as I can.
Yeah, well, I can understand that. I find it's useful for me to do things like identify podcast guests, because I can kind of see who's of the moment and not only of the moment, and so it's worth wading through a fair bit of narcissistic toxicity to find the odd gem, and it's a pretty good way of keeping abreast with the dynamic shifts of the political environment. How much that's useful is a different matter, but because I run this podcast, that's something I have to be on top of that, in order to stay conversant with the current. Well, part of what you do in a podcast is it speaks about the moment. And so you got to have a sense of what that moment is, for better or for worse. And so, at least that's what I tell myself when I'm on Twitter. But this might be and we're also hoping it'll work well for people to establish social networks, because at least you'll know that the people on the platform are interested in ideas, let's say. It'll be a great place for open people to meet, for example.
The students who are in all three courses, I try not to be too self-serving, but they all found it a very transformative experience.
Yeah.
But they did that. They started really bonding with each other. Because there was a shared journey and there was a shared set of ideas. There was a shared discourse space. Yeah, very much.
Yeah, well, soon people will have course-centered chat rooms, and we're hoping that if we start to grow to a large enough size, that people will start to spontaneously organize. Well, you can imagine meetups where people get together to watch a lecture and to discuss it. There's no reason to outsource a fair bit of the classroom organization, let's say, to the students themselves. And we're also, with an eye to the future, starting to think things through, like, well, one possibility that we've been investigating are cruises, specialized cruises, because, well, cruises, all things considered, especially compared to the cost of say a private university education, cruises aren't that expensive. They're actually quite remarkably inexpensive. I saw a retired couple, for example, who booked 51 cruises back to back because it was far cheaper than staying in an old folks home. And the service is a lot better, let's say. So, we're going to curate meetings for students. So another thing we've been thinking about doing is having a series of conventions, maybe a couple of times a year in major population centers, where we could bring, say, 10 professors together and maybe 5,000 students and do a weekend of, nothing but learning and also
exciting.
Yeah. And I just can't see why, with some social events at night, it seems to me highly likely that this is possible. And I also have a sneaking suspicion that because of the rise of AI, and the fact that increasingly much of what we see on the net won't be real, that the premium for in-person experiences is going to increase. Yeah, I think you can see that now with, the tour we were on, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah, what did you think of the tour? What was that like? How many days did you spend with me? And
was it 3 or 4? I can't remember. I think it was 4.
Yeah, I think it was 4.
Yeah. I had a really good time, and I enjoyed our dinners. You and I got to reconnect on a more personal level, which I deeply appreciated. I thought that, it was like touring with a rock star. I've told people I enjoy touring with a rock star. I don't want to be the rock star. That's you can have that. But I enjoyed it a lot.
Attention men who still believe in the American dream. In a world gone mad, the Precision 5 from Jeremy's Razors stands as a beacon of sanity. 5 blades of superior engineering offer a shave as unshakable as your faith that the nation's best days still lie ahead. Experience an exceptionally smooth, remarkably close shave and a testament to the fact that merit still matters. Stop giving your money to woke corporations that hate you. Get Jeremy's Razors Precision 5 instead. Available now at jeremy'srazors.com, walmart.com, and Amazon Prime.
Staff was fantastic. I enjoyed, there was electricity, some places more than others. And then, you and I it was really powerful in the way we were talking about earlier, after you gave a talk and that electricity was there, and to sit with you and talk afterwards, or even before. You were gracious. You would have let me to sort of talk a little bit about who I was before I introduced you, and feeling even that a little bit there. And a lot of people, especially the last one, because in the last one I didn't go back. I actually booked in a hotel right across from the convention center, and a lot of people were there from the event, and I got to talk to a lot of them, and there was a lot of them that, of course, they were expressing appreciation for you, but a lot of them were expressing a lot of appreciation for me and my work, and that was very, 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 very encouraging. So there was a lot about it I enjoyed. Like I said,
it was really good to have you there to, to provide informed overview of what I had presented, because I'm presenting things that are spontaneous. And so it's very good and for the audience as well, to have that reflected and then criticized in the proper critical sense, because the proper critical sense is separation of the wheat from the chaff, not derogation of everything as chaff, right? And so it's very, very helpful for people to see that modeled, but also to have it happen. And so
I thought we did a good job at that.
Yeah, I think so. Oh yeah, well, it was fun. We'll do it again. Yeah, it worked out real well. It was good too, because I had you and Konstantin Kisin and Jonathan Pageau along, and I've also traveled with Douglas Murray and Rex Murphy, and so all of that's all been extremely good to have that third party in there to interrogate, right, and to make a different kind of connection with the audience.
And if you'll allow me, you behind the curtain, off camera, you treat your people very well, and that impressed me throughout. You've risen to quite a bit of influence and notoriety, and people have been twisted by that in certain ways. And I was very impressed by how gracious you were with your staff, with your people, how kind you were.
Well, part of that, there's kind of a, what would you say? I
think that's an important thing to note.
It's an important thing to watch for when you're evaluating people.
But that's what I was doing.
Oh, yeah. No, I understand that. And it is a real marker for that. Like I've traveled with lots of people, and you learn very rapidly who kisses up and kicks down, which is not a testament to the integrity of their personality. But it's also a management style in a way, because we're very selective about who we hire, but also who we keep. And so there isn't anybody around at Peterson Academy or on my tour who isn't doing a stellar and necessary job. And so, and I also understand that, it's a very it's a very fast-paced enterprise to run a tour like that, and many things can go wrong, especially if you're trying to sustain it across multiple years. Like, it's a very unlikely endeavor, and so everybody who is involved, they're giving it 100%, and I'm very grateful for that. And they make my life a lot more straightforward, and my wife's life as well.
I saw you delegating, without question. And that's a marker too. That I look for that in people. I look for, can they delegate authority? Can they trust people to run with things? And you were basically, to my mind, you were managing things from sort of 30,000 feet above. You're giving sort of general orientation. Then you'd have specific things here and there. But other than that, people would say, we need to do this, or we need to come here, and you go, okay. And you were just like,
Yeah. Well, the other advantage, I mean, there's a bunch of advantages to that as a managerial style. I mean, the first advantage is for me, it frees me up to concentrate on only what's necessary. So when I thought through, well, what's necessary for the tour to work and to continue? Well, it's necessary that Tammy comes along with me and that she has a role and that works. Okay, so that has to be set up, and it is. Then it's necessary for me to get there. Like, no matter what, right? I have to be there like an hour ahead, period. And then I have to do a good job. And that's really the three things. And so everything else has been farmed out to other people. You know, the hotel logistics, the flights, the meals, all of the scheduling of my days, other people take care of that. And then if they do that fully, then I'm very happy about that, and they have something that's really crucial to do and can take pride in their work and are committed to it. And if they can't do that, well, then we figure that out very quickly and say, look, this isn't working. And it's just, I learned this even more intensely on the tour than when I was supervising graduate students. There's more play in the system with graduate students. It's easier in a way to not be quite as cut and dried with your decision making, even though